Jai Hind everybody. In continuation with the short clinical videos of PERIO Subharti, in which we give you various short clinical tips about pedontology and implantology, today's video will be about the 1, 2, 3, 4 rule in implantology. As we all know, implantology is prosthetic driven surgical treatment modality. And two things dictate the success of implantology. One is available bone, and the second thing is, of course, space has to be available for placement of a tooth. So, what exactly is this 1, 2, 3, 4 rule of implantology? Rule number one, what that means is that if we have to place an implant, let's say a single missing tooth or multiple missing teeth are there, for placement of the implant, after placement, 1 millimeter of bone should be available on the buccal and 1 millimeter on the palatal or the lingual side. What does that mean? If the total available bone is 6 millimeter width, the maximum diameter of the implant that we can place is actually 4 millimeter. So this 1 millimeter rule is actually based on the pretext that proper bone casing is essential for the success of implant, for the longevity of the implant. So 1 millimeter bone has to be present. The next rule is 2. 2 means that once we are placing the implant, let's say in a single edentulous space, after placement of the implant, 2 millimeter space has to be there from the outer border of the implant to the border of the tooth. So this distance on one side has to be 2 millimeter, other side also has to be 2 millimeter. This 2 millimeter distance is actually dictated by the biologic width around an implant. The biologic width around a natural tooth is roughly 2 millimeter, while it is 3 millimeter around an implant. What that means is, at the time of implant placement, once I place an implant, 1.5 millimeter on one side and 1.5 millimeter of available bone on the other side is essential. Otherwise, what will happen is, after loading of the implant, because the biologic width will be violated, biologic width 1.5 plus 1.5, that is 3 millimeter, what will happen is crestal bone loss would be occurring. So 2 millimeter distance, 1.5 rounded off to 2 millimeter, is essential from the adjacent teeth. Coming to rule number 3, whenever multiple implants are being placed, minimum 3 millimeter distance has to be present between the implants. Why 3 millimeter? How much was the biologic width around the implant? 3 millimeter. That is 1.5 on one side, 1.5 on the opposite side. So if two implants have to be placed, 1.5 requirement of this implant and 1.5 requirement of this implant. So minimum 3 millimeter distance has to be present between two implants, otherwise the biologic width would be violated. So after covering up rule number 1, 2, 3, which are basically implant placement guidelines based on available bone, we come to rule number 4, that is a prosthetic guideline. Whenever we are deciding that whether an implant should be placed or not, so ideally speaking, when we are examining the patient, that is the flap has not been reflected only, in that case from the gingival margin to the antagonist, minimum 4 millimeter of distance should be available for placement of a crown, a tooth later on. If that distance is not present, naturally a crown cannot be delivered over the placed implant. So one thing which we have to understand is that implantology is retrospective prostho. We have to see rule number 4 first, and accordingly we have to see rule numbers 1, 2, 3. So this was about the 1, 2, 3, 4 rule in implantology. If you want to learn more about such clinical tips in pedontology and implantology, do keep watching the YouTube videos of our channel of PERIO Subharti. Jai Hind.